As of the writing of this video, Star Trek has 11 television series, 1 miniseries, and 1 movie-exclusive series. They all have their own pros and cons, and I wanted to make a video summarizing what I think are the best and worst aspects of each Star Trek series. First, the original series. This series is very imaginative and whimsical, with a welcome, optimistic premise of fun adventures in space. It's also deeply philosophical and has a diverse cast, very progressive for its time. However, it's inevitably a product of its time and how it treats certain groups of people, most notably women and certain people of color. Although the cast is diverse, the minority characters don't tend to have much focus. Next, the animated series. It absolutely uses the animation medium to its full advantage, showcasing environments and creatures that would have been very difficult or impossible to create in live action at the time, or even today with CGI. Although the art style is decent, the animation itself is a bit awkward, as is the music and writing sometimes. Certain assets are also frequently reused. The Next Generation significantly expanded the Star Trek universe and created something entirely new that still had all the positive aspects of the original series. Like its predecessor, though, it was a product of its time and didn't do justice by many of its minority characters. While its episodic nature was good in some respects, it never really made time to tell lasting stories, nearly always moving on from the prevalent issue, sometimes permanently, at the end of each episode. Deep Space Nine was progressive by having a black man as the lead and taking the time to critically examine the ideals versus reality of the Federation. It was serialized yet had plenty of room for single-episode stories, and it featured multiple different perspectives besides solely Starfleet. Despite being serialized, some of its plots don't go very far or much of anywhere, such as the Bajorans' quest to return all the orbs of the Prophets, or exploration of the newly accessible Gamma Quadrant. It also introduced Section 31 and didn't dwell on the Changeling genocide plot as much as it could have. Voyager was the first series to have a woman as the primary captain and featured a whole new area of space to be explored, the Delta Quadrant. Rather than bouncing between quadrants like DS9 did with the Alpha and Gamma ones, Voyager was set almost entirely within the Delta Quadrant. It also featured former rivals Starfleet and the Maquis working together as one crew. Unfortunately, Voyager did have some of the same issues with being episodic as TNG, and perhaps the most poorly aged aspect of the series is the portrayal of Chakotay as a rather stereotypical indigenous character. It also could have focused on the initial Starfleet-Maquis rivalry more than it did. Enterprise was the first series to dive into the yet unseen 22nd century and let audiences see what the earliest days of Starfleet were like, giving more lore to species such as Vulcans, Andorians, and Klingons. Yet it made a rather sudden jump from being episodic and moving on to something new each week to being heavily serialized in its 3rd season, and it was less diverse and more misogynistic than TOS and TNG at times. Certain allegories in the narrative are also difficult to ignore. The alternate original series revived the Star Trek franchise and brought it to new audiences, proving that such a thing could be done and there was yet room for Star Trek in the modern day. But even as an alternate universe, it's both derivative and seems to misunderstand certain characters and aspects of Star Trek as a whole. It's also, once again, a bit sexist, and is disproportionately centered on action more so than storytelling. Discovery is perhaps the most diverse Star Trek series yet in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, and more. It was also the first to try the new formula of having a series that wasn't focused on a captain character, something that would be carried over into other newer Star Trek series. Its stories were about finding hope even in the darkest of times. series, making it a spiritual successor to DS9 in that regard. However, the show's serialization in particular is both a blessing and a curse, having very big mystery box style narratives without much room for the characters to breathe outside of them. It also has some pacing issues within its seasons and even individual episodes and scenes, and its setting changes to somewhere completely different starting in its third season. Short treks came along as a new format for the franchise, allowing stories to be told in less than a standard episode's runtime that were equally as complete and developed. Some episodes were live action, while others were animated, a nice variety of mediums. However, some of these stories were primarily for the purpose of setting up Season 2 of Discovery and other upcoming narratives, rather than getting to truly stand on their own. Picard followed up on storylines from previous entries into the franchise that were worth taking a closer look at, such as the fallout from the destruction of the planet Romulus. It also gave the Next Generation and its characters the proper ending that Star Trek Nemesis didn't really grant them. At the same time, Picard is notorious for being unusually violent, lacking internal consistency, and sidelining the characters first introduced in the series in favor of returning ones. Lower Decks is earnest, endearing, and relatable, making the Star Trek universe feel a little closer to home in all the best ways. As a comedy, it's got clever and entertaining humor, yet its narratives have real depth and some genuine serious moments. It's a comparatively small complaint, but the series can be a bit grotesque at times, and on occasion ended up underutilizing certain characters due to its unfortunately low episode count. Sometimes it also leans just a bit too strongly into its references to other Star Trek series and films. Prodigy offers a whole new perspective into the Star Trek universe, introducing it to younger audiences by having the main characters as kids who have not yet discovered the Federation and Starfleet. Of all Star Trek series, I would say this one has the best balance of serialization and episodic stories, with overarching plots that are well paced and spread across enough episodes that they allow for character development. This complaint is even smaller than the last one, but Prodigy's plots often involve time travel, which is always going to be at least a little confusing and not always straightforward. Finally, for now, Strange New Worlds expands the stories of characters who deserved it from their depiction in the original series as well as Discovery, most notably Captain Pike, Number 1, Uhura, Nurse Chapel, Dr. Mabenga, Sam Kirk, and more. It has just as many newly introduced characters who have equal depth and intrigue. There's a satisfying mix of serious and lighthearted episodes. Despite being a spin-off of Discovery, Strange New Worlds is definitely a big step back in terms of queer representation. It also has some pacing issues with its low episode count, some episodes which don't fully utilize the concepts they're based on, and hints of problematic elements such as bioessentialism. No Star Trek series can ever be perfect, and the best each new one can do is make an honest effort to learn from the mistakes of all the ones that came before it. What do you think are the best and worst qualities of each series? Do you agree with my opinions? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. I've got more on individual Star Trek series and the franchise as a whole, so be sure to check those out and subscribe for more. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time.